The marketplace of Xylar Prime buzzed with activity, a chaotic symphony of merchants hawking their wares, exotic creatures in cages, and the hum of starships docking and departing from the nearby spaceport. Among the throng, there was a palpable tension in the air. A human, a rarity in this part of the galaxy, was wandering the market alone. His name was Ethan Drake, a former soldier turned drifter, and his presence was enough to draw suspicious glances from the other species that populated the planet. Ethan had no business on Xylar Prime. He had landed here by chance, his ship running low on fuel and his credits dwindling. He didn't trust anyone here, and no one trusted him. Humans were still a relatively new species to the galactic stage, and their reputation was a mixed bag, fiercely independent, dangerously unpredictable, and unyielding in battle. As he moved through the crowd, his sharp eyes caught sight of a commotion near the center of the market. A large, heavily armored Zorathian slaver stood on a raised platform, showcasing a new batch of merchandise. Among the line of shackled aliens, one figure stood out to Ethan, a young Zorathian woman. Her scales shimmered a deep emerald green under the harsh light, and her amber eyes burned with defiance despite the bruises and chains that marred her. The slaver barked out her qualities, emphasizing her strength and resilience, traits desirable for labor. The crowd murmured in interest, but Ethan couldn't take his eyes off her. He had seen defiance like that before on the battlefield, in the eyes of comrades who refused to give up, no matter the odds. Ethan clenched his fists. Slavery was common in the outer reaches, but that didn't make it right. Memories of his past battles surged in his mind, battles fought to liberate colonies and defend those who couldn't fight for themselves. This wasn't his war, but the sight of her, proud even in chains, awakened something deep within him. The bidding began, and Ethan's heart raced. He had barely enough credits to keep his ship running, let alone to outbid a crowd of wealthy alien merchants. Still, he stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. 5,000 credits, he called, earning a mix of surprised and scornful looks. The slaver sneered. A human? You can't afford her. Move along before you embarrass yourself. Ethan stood his ground. I said 5,000. The crowd murmured. Few dared to challenge the slaver's authority, but Ethan didn't care. He had no intention of paying. He had a plan, a reckless, desperate plan, but it was all he had. As the slaver prepared to dismiss him, Ethan's hand moved to his hip, where a concealed pulse pistol rested. His other hand subtly activated a small device in his pocket, a signal jammer he had rigged from scraps aboard his ship. The moment the jammer activated, the slaver's control collar on the woman malfunctioned, and her chains fell loose. Run! Ethan shouted, drawing his pistol and firing a warning shot into the air. Chaos erupted. The crowd scattered, screaming, as the slaver roared in fury and lunged at Ethan. The Zorathian woman hesitated for only a moment before bolting into the crowd. Ethan fired again, this time hitting the slaver's shoulder, buying her precious seconds. He turned and sprinted after her, weaving through the panicked masses. Keep moving! He yelled when he caught sight of her. She glanced back, her amber eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination, and nodded. They raced through the labyrinthine streets of Xylar Prime, pursued by slaver enforcers armed with plasma rifles. Ethan led her through narrow alleys and abandoned warehouses, relying on his military training to stay ahead of their pursuers. Finally, they reached the docks. Ethan's ship, a battered but reliable freighter named the Wayfarer, sat waiting. He ushered her aboard, slamming the hatch shut as plasma bolts scorched the hull. Strap in! He shouted, sprinting to the cockpit. The ship roared to life, and Ethan piloted it into the atmosphere, dodging fire from Xylorian patrol ships. The Zorathian woman sat silently in the co-pilot's seat, gripping the armrests as the ship shook violently. Once they were safely in hyperspace, Ethan leaned back in his seat, breathing heavily. He glanced at her. You okay? She studied him, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but firm. Why did you do that? You don't even know me. Ethan shrugged. Didn't need to. You didn't belong in chains. No one does. She tilted her head, her amber eyes narrowing. You're either a fool or a hero. Maybe both. He chuckled. Probably both. For the next few days, they traveled in uneasy companionship. She introduced herself as Lyra, a member of a Zorathian resistance group that had been betrayed and captured. Her people had been fighting against the slavers for decades, but their numbers were dwindling. Ethan listened to her story in silence, his mind racing with possibilities. When they reached a remote star system, Lyra prepared to leave, thanking him for his help. But Ethan stopped her. Where will you go? Back to the fight, she replied. It's all I know. Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. Then I'm coming with you. She blinked, surprised. Why? Because I've seen what humans can do when they fight for something bigger than themselves, he said. And because I'm tired of running. Lyra studied him for a long moment before nodding. Then you'd better be ready. The resistance isn't for the faint of heart. Together, they plotted a course to the resistance base, unaware that their actions on Xylar Prime had ignited a spark across the galaxy. Word of a human risking his life to save a Zorathian spread like wildfire, inspiring others to rise against oppression. Ethan and Lyra's partnership became the stuff of legends, a human and a Zorathian fighting side by side, proving that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, hope could thrive and freedom was worth any cost.